It's been established ever since last year that Google has been discriminatory against straight white men, with the events of James Damore being fired from Google for having a memo that suggests ways of fixing Google's diversity issue. The memo is being misconstrued and misinterpreted as James Damore being sexist, racist, misogynist, etc., even though the content is pretty innocuous and there's absolutely nothing inflammatory or discriminatory with his suggestions unless if it's on the hands of easily offended Tumblrites, which unfortunately has populated pretty much most of the mainstream media outlet these days to the dismay of absolutely everyone. Now, Google itself has a lot of failings and they try so hard to virtue signal to everyone about what a good company they are instead of actually trying to fix the problems that they have in their own company, like, I don't know, constant discrimination. There was that one time where Google made this engine that detects diversity in films, which is not only unbelievably horrendous, discriminatory, and not having any sense of purpose other than patting Google's backs and how not racist they are, but I even doubt that the machine could even work. More details in my own video down below. Another hilarious instance is when Google tried to have an AI to curb hate speech and detect the amount of toxicity that a comment has. A lot of us are having tons and tons of fun with this horrendously garbage API, so check out my other video for it, and also check out the comments for the things that Google referred to as toxic and non-toxic, including its opinions on traps, which might or might not surprise you. Anyway, the story of James Damore continues as he is now filing a class action lawsuit against Google. Now, if you guys want something truly eye-opening and just absolutely horrendous about Google, I highly recommend you guys to check out the complaint on the link in the description. Download it on Dropbox by clicking the link right here, and oh man, reading through that thing alone is going to open up eyes that have never been opened up before. I will tell you what's going on in just the first couple of complaints, and then we'll proceed to just get through the highlights. Google shamed teams lacking female parity at TGIF meetings. So in a TGIF meeting, you have presenters in Women History Month shaming departments that have less than 50% women in the workforce, and praising departments that have more than 50% of the women in the workforce. Damore attended an event called Google's Diversity and Inclusion Summit, which is attended by 100 employees, and that he felt pressure to attend the event. An event that highlighted Google's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Oh, Google, you saint, what will minorities would do without your kind patronage? The summit covered up general topics such as how Google could increase its diversity by treating preferred categories of people, which obviously consist of women, but not all ethnic minority groups, which is a really nice way of saying Google is okay with discrimination based on gender and ethnicity. Not only that, but also providing extra interviews during the hiring process, putting applicants to a more welcoming environment based on their race and gender, which probably means Google will throw me in the cheap bootleg recreation of my home island just to make the environment more appealing. Google, I don't want to feel like I'm home when I'm working with you. I'll decide that for myself, okay? I'll decide that by the time I actually wanted to work with you, which is not in a million years. And here's the best part. Google defined diverse individuals as women or individuals who are not Caucasian or Asian. That's right. Google virtue signals so hard discriminating against whites and Asians are perfectly acceptable. Which in that case, Google, I will file my own discrimination lawsuit. But I guess my brown skin probably helps confusing my Indian and Asian heritage, so never mind then. I'll help the straight white men conservatives for now. Damore then complained to the HR, and the HR basically admitted that employees with conservative views and values did not feel included, and that the HR mentioned how she and other HR representatives had received similar complaints in the past from many employees. So not only discriminating against white and Asians, but also discriminating against conservative values. This probably explains why a lot of these people have hammer and sickle in their freaking profiles. The summit ended up with the presenters specifically asking the employees to give written feedback on the program, and thus the Google memo was born. We'll skip ahead to the story of the content inside because I'm very sure all of you already knows, and I already covered it in my last video. Check them all out in the bottom. Now, ever since then, Damore posted the memo in the Google group discussion forum and sending it to multiple people, questioning whether or not the discrimination that Google does all the time is actually legal. The complaints were never investigated by Google's HR, and Google ends up firing him, which again, you all know the story. Then the story gets a little messed up. Damore attended this event called a diversity training event, which is held at Mountain View headquarters. The event was broken into two parts, an online course followed by an in-person training. After Damore questioned the political bias that is happening in the workplace in response to the online course session, Google's response is just to attend the in-person training. The in-person training is titled Bias Busting. If that doesn't scare you, we are just getting started. The training was run by the Unbiased group at Google. I assume that these people dress up as the freaking Dai Li. When Damore presented his disagreements, other employees, including managers, just laughed at him. They considered his views to be conservative, therefore flawed and worthy of disparagement. If that sounds like a cult, it freaking is. This is where Damore posted the memo in a skeptics forum at Google, and then the memo is leaked by Vice, Motherboard, and Gizmodo. All of these sites selectively quoted the memo and misinterpreted it. And ever since then, Damore received death threats. Not the typical vague death threats that the feminists love to parade on, actual death threats documented for all of you to see. This one from Alex said that he's a misogynist, a terrible human, and that he wants him to be fired. This is an example of how Google's management team encouraged rank and file employees to attack other Googlers who express political viewpoints outside the company's very narrow views. When Damore was terminated, neither of the HR departments identified any Google policy or procedure that Damore had violated, nor do they even specify how. This is where the story gets seriously messed up. Google employees were awarded bonus for arguing against Damore's views. That's right, Google is financially incentivizing those who disagree with Damore. Meanwhile, YouTubers are being demonetized left and right, YouTube videos are being put in purgatory, people's lives and channels are being ruined. Nobody at Google or YouTube are willing to bat a goddamn eye. They're going to literally reward you for thinking the way that they want you to think, even if the way that they want you to think is discriminatory, awful, and probably even illegal. I mean, that is so messed up. Please win this lawsuit, Damore. Goodness gracious. Specifically, how Google does it is the Google recognition team allowed employees to give fellow employees peer bonuses for arguing against Damore's political viewpoints. While the bonuses were typically reserved for outstanding work performance or for going above and beyond an employee's job duties, defending the liberal agenda or defending violations of California's employment law is not in any of Google's employee job description. Very nice script there, writer. So that's just the surface. That's just page 16 out of 60, not including the embedded files like Damore's original memo and the screenshots to support some of the complaints. I highly encourage all of you to read the complaint yourself and probably even share your favorite parts in the comments. Another Google employee named Marlene Jackal posted an article on Medium titled "The Empress Has No Clothes: The Dark Underbelly of Women Who Code and Google Women Tech Makers." I highly recommend you to read it. It basically tells the story of Marlene, who has been a target of a malicious smear campaign simply for going against the radical feminist narrative and being an outspoken moderate conservative at Google. Now, Marlene decided to make a Twitter thread basically showing the highlights of the complaints. So if you're a bit too lazy in reading the complaints yourself, we're going to cover up some of the hilarious highlights. But again, it's recommended that you read it in full if you want to get the full story because my god, it's really eye-opening. So without further ado, let's get into the highlights. Diversity at Google means kicking cheesy white males out of conference speaker lineup for their melanin level. The screenshot highlighted a part in the complaint that says, well, go read it yourself. So you're going to be kicked out just because your melanin levels aren't on the acceptable range, according to Google. Diversity at Google means using companies' resources to recruit for Antifa. Someone decided to start a forum post that talks about starting a revolution of some sort, and it starts off with the OP saying, "My feelings are hurt," which is pretty damn hilarious. Somebody then suggested to get in touch with friendly local Antifa members and not do it alone, and the rest of the discussion is about recruiting Antifa members. I mean, Jesus freaking Christ. Diversity at Google means getting promoted for trashing middle-aged white males, but fired for telling the truth about gender differences. A post in the developer product group stated, "If you put a group of 40-something white men in a room together and tell them to come up with something creative or innovative, they'll come back and tell you how enjoyable the process was and how they want you to do it again. But they come up with bugger all as a result." Now, this offensive post is being sent into Google HR, but the Google HR dismissed it and saying that the post is to highlight diverse perspectives, which is a nice way of saying it's okay to say screw you to 40-year-old white men. The Google employee who filed the complaint responded to the HR by saying that you have to replace the 40-year-old white men with women. And my god, that sounds pretty freaking sexist, isn't it? But Google HR failed to respond because they know that they are wrong and this company needs to be nuked from orbit. Diversity at Google means keeping secret blacklists to apprehend wrong thinkers who visit Googler friends for lunch. This tweet highlighted another section in the complaint that basically says Google maintains a secret blacklist of conservative offers. Curtis Yarvin, a well-known conservative blogger who has reportedly advised members of the president's administration, visited the Google's office to have lunch. This triggered a silent alarm directed towards security personnel to escort him off of the premises and follow the protocols. Jesus freaking Christ! I'm not surprised if the protocol consists of him being thrown into the bias-busting program. Then, a Google employee asked HR if the writers can be removed from the blacklist, but the HR not only refused with the request, but reconfigured the internal system so that it was no longer possible to see who was on the blacklist. Jesus Christ! Diversity at Google means kicking Christians when they're down. The tweet highlighted a post that basically said Republicans are Christians and therefore idiots because they think the earth is 10,000 years old. Imagine if it was another religion in that sentence. Diversity at Google means summarily firing anyone with a different opinion. There was a post from Jennifer basically saying that going against diversity is harmful to the minority groups that Google is trying to make feel safe and included. I don't know, Google. Safe and included is not something that you're going to be doing towards 40-year-old straight white Christian men, so shove that inclusivity nonsense up yours. She continued that to create a safe environment, we must reject anti-diversity beliefs/efforts. There are also trainings for you to help curb this, which is the nicest way of telling people to get back to indoctrination center. A reply down below basically said that in order to improve productivity of their coworkers, we must fire people who create an unpleasant environment. Another reply basically said that someone redacted should be fired because he made statements that have made women and men uncomfortable. This isn't character assassination, it's just highlighting bad behavior, which is like saying, no, I didn't murder your family, I just rearranged the inside of their braids with this 44 Magnum. Diversity at Google means blacklisting former employees finding work with a wink and a nod, highlighting a post that said, if we really care about diversity in tech, we don't just need to chase serial offenders out of Google, we need to discourage them all throughout the industry. We should be willing to give a wink and a nod to other Silicon Valley employers over terminable offenses, not send the worst parts of tech packing with a smile and 3 years of employment at Google on their resumes. Proving once again that perhaps nuking Silicon Valley isn't such a bad idea after all. Diversity at Google means posting how-to guidelines on political violence. The post started with an absolutely deranged forum post that would only make sense if I say that this is coming from a school shooter, and then they proceed to post such incredibly basic lessons of punching that you'll get in every white belt of every martial arts self-defense lesson ever. Actually, that would be an insult because as someone who was in Taekwondo, that is something that I've learned even way before I entered the white belt. So either the Antifa members are all white belt amateurs or they just really suck at punching. Diversity at Google means putting white males in their place. There's literally a freaking unpopular opinion puffin meme about firing bigoted white men. According to Google, bigoted white men means someone who merely criticized the diversity programs at Google for being ineffective and discriminatory. So bigoted here basically means disagreeing with the cult of Google. It's to the point where people cannot even distinguish between the bigots and the defender of bigots. It reminds me so much of that freaking snowball meme. Diversity at Google means that if you work for Google HR, your job is to spread garbage memes from freaking everyday feminism. Diversity at Google means firing accused men on the spot because everyone knows that they're all guilty of something. Diversity at Google means basing promotions on race and gender. Diversity at Google means taking a class to heal your toxic whiteness. Diversity at Google means fighting back against sexist and heterosexist norms wherever there may lurk. Diversity at Google means giving polygamists a place to crash when their wives are at home getting stuff? What the hell? Diversity at Google means showering accolades on individuals who identify as non-human life forms while punishing normal family men. So if you're one of those people who think that the left has been absolutely degenerate with them shoving LGBT issues everywhere to the point where it affects children, saying that you want your family to be normal is just not acceptable. However, if you want to raise your children with a freaking plural pronoun, that is pretty much fine. And that if you tell these people that they're mentally freaking damaged, don't worry about them. They are happier this way. Well, I am happy that you are happier this way, but see how long you're going to be happy by the time I report you into my psychiatrist. Now, if you haven't been paying attention throughout this entire video, I want you to pause whatever games that you're playing or activities that you're doing while listening to this video and just look at the screen for just a brief moment. Just look at it. Oh, please forgive me, your majesty, for I have questioned your identity as a yellow-scaled wingless dragonkin. This is real. This is 2018, everyone. Diversity at Google means that when a guy walks into the ladies' room, the women in there better not say anything, or else they'll get reported to HR. Diversity at Google means ignoring your own search results when they give you politically incorrect answers. Ah yes, those politically incorrect answers, which at this moment translates to scientifically correct answers but are too offensive for the cult of Google to handle, so they're going to dismiss it anyway. I still remember those classic articles literally denying facts and science and truth in general. And there you go, that is the story of the cult of Google. The people in Google think like absolute freaking cultists, the practices are completely discriminatory, and let's not forget they are so inclusive to the point of including people who identify as fictional freaking creatures from bootleg fantasy lores. You know, as I'm doing my college as a guy in information systems, I just realized that my college has become more and more pointless when most of my Android programming lessons are learned from watching tutorials on YouTube. And now that Google has basically turned almost everyone working on it into a freaking cult member, the only thing that I can think of is to avoid Google as much as possible and tell the future generations that working at Google means death to your intelligence, free will, dignity, and soul. So you can work at Google getting tons and tons of money and credentials, but you're also going to need to sell your own freaking soul to the devil. My question to the viewer is, would you let the future generation to get this kind of treatment and make their life more and more miserable? Or would you just tell them to stay inside their houses, being completely antisocial, playing video games, wanking to hentai, but at least having more dignity than a yellow-scaled wingless dragonkin ruining society by removing people's rights, robbing their future, their income, their ability to speak their mind, and their hopes and dreams? Viewers, I will let you to decide.